It's Saturday, October 15th, 2022. This morning on episode or E42 with CBS, the network artists, or I don't know what to call them, journalists perhaps, they put together something on Samuel Adams. Again, for significance, I know I've heard of something called an Uncle Sam. I see the statue of Samuel. Again, I don't live in Boston. I went to Boston when I was very, very young. With Linda and Lou, they took me there. I was supposed to go to Northeastern. Something happened when I was at Northeastern, visiting a friend, and then left. And then they accepted my application. I was supposed to go, and then things fell apart. As they so often do in this life frame. So I'm watching the Samuel Adams. They're talking about significant key-up words. And not key being Q-U-I for tequila. I'm speaking of key as in K-E-Y and ops, O-P-S, for my person. I'm listening to the journalist. I hear him say this word, moronic. I've heard it thousands of times before. It did not dawn on me until I met with the Utah representatives, speaking on looking for signs of God, country, and family. Inside of this book, there's a place where it speaks of Moroni, for I see. So he was saying something about Samuel Adams. It sounded so moronic. And I'm like, oh, that's just such an interesting play on euphemisms and symbolic gestures that the sublingual just throws out there, since nobody really thinks of the great beyond and the inherited apparent issues with whatever goes on within how they plan their future, and there's the rest of us in the leftover and always right. Being a bifurcated, double-headed bird somewhere between a color black and a color gold, and then having a one-headed bird responsibility at some level. They also have in here pieces of really important things I've discovered. The ether is talked about. I don't know if that's what they hit me with in the needles that take me out when I'm perfectly healthy and walking around. And I don't know. It's a system where there's phases and then it goes black, and then I wake up and it's another day, and it's like the day before is totally erased. It's frightening. So I see ether, I see Alma, I see Hela. I see very key, important, significant features of my own security, even if it's falsely felt at this point. I see definitions. I see family. I see God. I see country written into some of the verse. Not that I haven't seen it in King James Version. It's just much more clear for me in this particular testament of the Jesus Christ church representative that they use in this area. with Je suis and Yahweh. I am Glenway on that, where I grew up in a glen, and there is some kind of lion's den that is always in my peripheral, like frightened of, but also a Leo by birth, so I don't know. So I'm watching this Samuel Adams piece, and it is as piecemeal. Thine smite thee will, not of man, but of piecemeal. This looks piecemeal, in a PIECE kind of a way. So I'm watching it. It's enlightening. Then there's this piece that comes at the bottom that says that Suffolk County government is being something to do with a cyber attack. I have no way of knowing if that has to do with the report that I submitted to YouTube, because I have no other way of doing it. I also saw that NASA came out this week on Brother Star's Day and Alexander's Day of Wednesday, not knowing if that, well, let's just put it this way, it was on 10/14, and it was on Wednesday. And they came out saying that there's a double star system that's going on between something called a NASA, NASA. Then they have the letters ESA. Then they have the letters OSA. Then they have the letters STSCI. Then they have the letters JPL-CALTECH. That has to do with something called a James Webb Telescope. They claim it captures images of rings of dust and whirling stars. It says it's a violent interaction between two star systems in a double star system. And that was on 10/12/2022. Just so the correct brother star is represented on the whatever, since my Alexander is a different WED. And that was at 4 p.m. for Grandpa Star One Off and ABC Channel 7. It was at a time of 47.14. So here's this piece this morning on, and then I'm watching this small clip on something called a Herschel Walker and on a war knock for this Georgia on this side. And I see that Herschel is wearing this gigantic guardian angel, is what it looks like, a winged angel, which now is categorically attributed and associated with some of the European oil paintings of a different genre, different time period, different catalog completely from this modern version of history. And then my ancient perspective on how do I explain this modality. Now, in real field terms of toiling the fields, I'm in the field yesterday. I picked my son up from school. I walked the Bell Boulevard, several times for exercise, and up from the grates in the street are gases coming up. I cover my nose as best I can. I don't have a gas mask as I walk. So that's in the back of my head. And as if that wasn't bad enough, because it was multiple trips that I went up there that I could smell, it was that strong, the gas, which I don't know what it is. I then took my son to the park, and as I did, there was a yellow bus, and I was not able to catch the name on the side of the yellow bus, but it was sitting at the stop sign waiting for all the children to pass through, and it was idling. I don't know where and at what gas depot this yellow bus filled up at, but it was in front of a children's park, which was the Marie Curie Park, and it was idling at the stop sign, and there was such a noxious fume cloud, almost like the children were being fumigated as they were walking, and myself, as we were walking across the street. And it was the kind of fumes that were oily in its scent, and it stuck like at ground level. It didn't disperse up. I mean, again, this is chemical engineers and chemical weapons specialists, but I wouldn't know. It's just what my field observation is, having been exposed to it and not knowing, not having a hand to hold or phone number of a representative that collects this data. So I don't have to do this in a way which might put me in more harm's way. So I'm walking through this, and then after that, I started to get dizzy. I started to lose my balance. Um, Nerve agent, nerve toxin, I don't know. But it was a yellow bus, and I have no idea of knowing where it filled up, what was in the gas fuel tank, what fossil fuel. I don't know what fossil fuel company. I don't know who sent the representative. I don't even know if the man driving the fumigation machine even knows what he's into or what he was hired for, but he is in my direct path. So for me, it's seen as an enemy, like in my territory or in my station at this point. I don't know how to find a representative to report that to. So instead, I reported to NYPD that the crossing guard in the morning and in the afternoon was absent. There was some vacancy at school crossing guard. Don't know what that has to do. I mean, like, again, at Vanguard, these are important details, but also important, I would think, would be making sure I had an assigned representative that I could make these official reports to of how I'm being fumigated or chemically like intoxication, and I have no way out of this. So this is the Samuel Adams viewpoint this morning, or teaching, because I didn't get this level of education in the school in New York for whatever fight was going on that limited or stunted my education, and for whatever purpose we're here, and I seem to be now trapped in some kind of rip current that took me out of my natural path and swept me into this really dangerous and hazardous feature that has some purpose. I just can't figure it out.
This morning, The Revolutionary, a new book about Samuel Adams by Pulitzer Prize winner Stacy Schiff. Perhaps no member of the American Revolution is less understood than the man who Jefferson called the leader of it.
I find it interesting, the one president ancestor of founding fathers that they let me meet and go to Port Jefferson with. He is mentioned in this and they also mention John Hancock. That is another very interesting acknowledgement. Now, Samuel Adams, in my life frame, the only thing I've ever heard, not that I've ever bought, not that I've ever drank, was an IPA by the same name. Apparently, it's something in a classification of a beer, being a BEER, that people enjoy drinking at some form of mixology.
Part of that's because Samuel Adams didn't want to be remembered. Part of that's because of what we've turned him into, a hot.
I have to say, this is one of the most interesting poses because I have several times, and quite by accident, it just feels like what's comfortable when I'm standing in a room that I don't necessarily want to be in, or on the street corner waiting for a light to change amongst strangers that come in, they leave, I never see again, and I'm just stuck here doing really hazardous field work for which it feels as a punishment I don't deserve.
A hothead, a brand of beer. The truth, thankfully, is far more interesting, as we found out at the Old South Meeting House on the Freedom Trail in Boston.
Now, what I find interesting is the 77 and the 76. As a 1014, no, I'm sorry, as a 1012, they did that purposely. Something in the man's department, just so they can come to terms with just how much they've failed me personally as I've been here. And I know one of them doesn't like to fail. I have no idea about the other one. But it is dangerous.
And what brought me to this book in large part was how little we knew about him. We all recognize the name. We know so little about him.
First things first, please try not to call him Sam.
His enemies later refer to him as Sam Adams in a somewhat derogatory way. So when he's written off by 19th century historians, he tends to become that incendiary Sam Adams. So it's a little bit of a term of disrespect, I think.
Sam was first used as a brush off. Later in our times, a beer. Hey, buddy.
Now, this I find really interesting at Boston Dynamics, considering Eric had a Boston Red Sox hat on while he was on the treadmill and I was on the elliptical. Just saying, when two star systems meet, it is just. But here they have on black and gold and it says security. And then they're popping open a Samuel Adams and there's a robot.
Hey, buddy, you want a Sam Adams? In fact, Samuel Adams' legacy is far more consequential than the portrait on the front of a bottle. Jefferson said he was the most important part of the revolution. Did I get that right?
You did. He says he's basically, if there had been a leader, that man was Samuel Adams. And he calls him the earliest, the most active, and the most persevering patriot.
This was his place.
This was where he was several times the man of the hour, exactly.
Stacy Schiff arrived at Samuel Adams after a career spent documenting fascinating lives. Vladimir Nabokov's wife, Ben Franklin, Cleopatra.
Wow, some really powerful names there. Vladimir, Benjamin, Franklin, especially since my mom grew up on an elm. They later made Freddie living on Elm Street. I don't know how that became a horror movie, but in my real personal life, it seems my mother's lived a horror story and mine has not gotten any better. Just so the strong names in some country, family, and God system know exactly what it feels like in some outdoor chemical attack that nobody seems to be responding to in my benefit.
Patra and the witches of Salem. Her latest subject seemed like destiny. You're from Adams, Massachusetts.
Now, is that Jerusalem? Just, it gets really difficult because I see a lot of the engineers that are working in the fields, toiling the fields around here, and they're progressively getting to be of country that I don't recognize. Doesn't look very Samuel Adams anymore. And when I do spot someone that looks more like that, it is so rare. And it's unbeknownst, usually. And it's so few and far between. It's pathetic how anybody could think that this buddy system is actually working.
I mean, come on.
I'm from Adams, Massachusetts. Yes, I am. Which some people I think was named for John, but was in fact named for Samuel. And that was part of the embarrassment of this book. I had written, there's a cameo of Samuel Adams in my Ben Franklin book. And at one point it occurred to me that I knew embarrassingly little about this person about whom I had written. And that it was even more embarrassing because, in fact, yes, I am from Adams, Massachusetts.
Samuel Adams was born into wealth. But after the British dissolved a land bank his father had established to help lend money to colonists, the family was ruined. For the first 40 years of his life, many considered Samuel Adams a failure, until the man met the moment. Starting with the imposition of the Stamp Act.
I'm just curious, does that run parallel to the Gunders? Just possibly in Iowa? Because I don't know what the real backstory is. My grandmother being a McClurg and my grandfather having died by the time I arrived, and my mother not being honest about anything my entire life. Just being quiet and almost like she didn't exist. If I needed something on a top shelf or I need my hair brushed or braided, she was there for that, but not much more.
In 1765, to the Boston Massacre, Adams operated behind the scenes to rile up the citizenry, most influentially as a newspaper opinion writer, almost always using assumed names. Adams was a master manipulator of the news.
I would say master propagandist is probably the two words that best characterize him. I mean, he does that. You probably see that best after the Boston Massacre. The trials have taken place. The British soldiers who had fired on civilians are tried. All but 2 of them are found to be innocent. And Adams then goes to the press and relitigates the entire case, making everyone seem guilty. And in fact, convincingly so.
That's Sam Adams. Yes, that's Sam Adams. And whatever's happening here tonight, he's the one man who holds the key to the situation.
The Boston Massacre eventually led to the
Oh, and there it is with the QUI, or is that the KEY? Not quite sure.
Boston Tea Party, reenacted here in 1953 for the CBS series You Are There.
If we fail here, a whole revolution, all that we've planned for years, will die.
3 ships in the harbor, 3 teams of men. We don't know precisely who they are. They are lightly disguised as Native Americans, some of them better disguised than others.
The destruction of tens of millions of dollars in British goods, puppet mastered by Adams and others, is still recreated every 15 minutes in Boston Harbor today. But when you're fomenting a revolution, sometimes
You need practice. This is revolution practice.
Yeah.
Is what I think we're watching here.
Yeah.
That was a good
That
one.
was a good throw.
Yeah, it was. Wow, another good one.
Why was he able to piss people off so magnificently?
I think there's a tenacity there, which may come from the I don't care what people think of me school. He's like a cartoon character, constantly sort of running circles around Crown officials. And I think there's a certain amount of creativity to that. I mean, there was no loophole that he cannot dive through.
add to that, the British appeared often to rule through a combination of fickleness and...
Oh, wait a minute. I see a symbol here that was displayed on someone's sweatshirt the other day. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't really follow these trends and what you're all up to, but when they put them so artistically together for me, while I'm being gassed in the streets multiple times and losing the ability to even neurologically walk straight, and I can't seem to get anybody from the public health system to treat me properly, and I have no money, They've taken my kids. They blacksmithed me with some 1013 in a 51515. There's a hive, there's a 5, there's live, and then there's been jive going on. But I don't really see benefit from my one position and person in any of this. To help who?
Inattention. Is it just the way our American history is written, or were the British really that moronic?
Now, does he mean Moroni? I met with a live representative from Utah. I clarified that. Because they also sent me somebody who I was totally not interested in, by the name of Christopher Marone. He was Citadel. He was a nice person. He was kind and caring to myself and to Alexander and my other children. He actually gave them their first set of small soldiers, for which sparked an entire theme within the house that Daniel and Alexander would spend hours. This is before video games, when they moved wherever, and they would spend hours setting them all up, staging a scene. They'd come up with a script. They'd come up like all by themselves. And they were just amazing children to have in a quiet home and to be their mother and move around them. I mean,
how they tried to manage all this. And it just seemed like one blunder after another.
The number of missteps, the number of moments at which Adams gains traction because there has been British overreach or British tone deafness is extraordinary. And what's really striking is the level of ignorance in Great Britain, the inability to either take the colonies seriously or to even place them on a map. I mean, most people didn't know if Boston was in the West Indies or the East Indies. I mean, there was just tremendous lack.
Right, that's a national security concern I'm still going through. Are we in a French and Indian War? Are we in a 7-year war? How are they, why am I 44 years in the field and I don't learn this until I turn 43, and my son is now going to some school that doesn't even have an American flag on it this year and has a black shroud around it, for which I can't figure out how any of that got put into play. I have no idea what it means. Not by any standard.
Lack of knowledge of what they were dealing with.
Schiff's The Revolutionary gets deeply into details, including Adams' love-hate relationship with John Hancock, whom Adams regarded as far too consumed with clothes and fame.
All right, that's kind of my beef quietly in, now how am I going to be your biggest fan if I don't even know anything about you? That's interesting. I mean, one of us has access to unlimited resources, clothes, symbols, people, networks, and so on and so forth, because he's been gifted and essentially spoon-fed his entire life. And then there's the other part of the us in the US, where I've been just ripped out of my way by some rip current and just left adrift, it feels like. And now in a really dangerous entanglement for which I have no idea how to get. I mean, it feels like a dead end. That's really what it feels like. And I really don't see anyone caring. In fact, the Zion Church sent me a timeout card. I'm like, oh. But then, of course, the alternate to that is they put the apparent inherent up in the corner, and the 76. He did a naked spread right on the front of People magazine, and I'm like, whoa! I'm not looking. That's very Sports Illustrated. Just saying, like, it doesn't belong on the cover of People, but man, does it pack a punch back at the Vice and Virtue Police they really sent a strong message on that one.
And it gets into what happened after the revolution, when Adams less successfully served as lieutenant governor and then governor of Massachusetts. Positions of power didn't really suit Samuel Adams, nor did any interest in hagiography. He didn't really leave his papers. He didn't write an autobiography. It's almost like he didn't care.
John Adams.
It really leaves me to question. One of the us in star systems has this unlimited whatever, and could have asked the other one of us to work for him and then made an introduction quietly without me having to do any of this YouTube nonsense. But that never, did that not dawn on somebody or cross someone's mind? So what, you're purposely now withholding opportunity for what?
At several junctures says to him, could you please collect your papers? No one will be able to understand the revolution without your papers. Those are 2 decades of essential writing. You really need to put them together. Everyone will be interested. And Adams, for whatever reason, never picks up on it. He really leaves the history to others. And we know what happens when you leave the history to others. Other people's versions creep in.
You said he made almost as much trouble for historians as he did for the British.
I think it's really hard to get a sense of him. There's all of this tremendous 18th century testimony to how central and how vital he is. Every founding father basically says he's in the vanguard. And then he's off the radar. And putting him back in the picture requires a certain amount of effort.
Oh, yes, it does. A certain amount of effort for which I don't see any being put forth. My face should not look like this. I should not be walking through. I should not be put on some schedule. I should not be ringed to somebody that is going to cause so much harm just by a paper glance, not by anything necessarily real. But if left in the situation, has the potential to hurt me in ways that are really foul. At what point does humanity stand up and say, no, we don't act that way, we're not that way? Because I have proof that you all have acted in concert in direct opposite from the way you say that you're acting when you have to stand up and defend something. Now here on the same broadcast, which is CBS Saturday mornings, it says right here on a ticker tape, not that it is, because I've been cyber attacked here in Bayside, Queens, or the county of Queens, the area of Long Island. I've been hit in several areas. I've been hit in Suffolk County by cyber attack, really bad. Sent me to the hospital. Well, I sent myself to the hospital after going through several stages of reporting in to different authorities, like local Suffolk police, got on their surveillance camera, got on National Guards at a airport booth because I wanted to have some chain of command to reference back to, so they couldn't say, because it would be odd for me to show up at an airport, being MacArthur, at a booth just to look the person in the face and then reverse and go off to and I even asked for, do you know where the police station is? Because I had never visited the police station, but I wanted to make a memory with that guard because it would be so unusual of an event, as is the cyber attack upon my person, for which I don't even have words, because I'm not at that level of high standard and intelligence where they actually explain to me that they've chosen me to hurt me in some fashion. I'm not on that schedule. Apparently I'm on the schedule. I'm just not made aware that I'm on that level of schedule and that others are allowing this to happen. But here, it says Suffolk County.
To the Broadway stage, where Samuel L. Jackson hasn't won
Suffolk
awards
County
for more than
government dealing with serious fallout due to cyber attack. What does that actually mean? I have no idea. But the fallout, that's my key op word for I'm in the fallout shelter. And it has to do with a cyber attack where I've been cyber attacked here as well. And not by a terminal I wasn't on a terminal when I was cyber attacked necessarily. It was from the stereo field of, I don't know, heliosphere. I've seen them reference it. I mean, I'm trying to construct in-field toil words for how I've been abused while being neglected in some hazardous operation for which they ripped me currently into, where the words actually seem to work with some of the visual acknowledgments from God's beyond, let's call it, or the great beyond. I'm not quite sure.
Check out this new image captured by the James Webb Space Telescope.
Now, it says up here, NASA, ESA, OSA, STSCI, JPL-CALTECH. This is the regular Channel 7 news that they put on for the locals. It's on this Verizon box of however they work this level of technology in the field. And these rings, this is what I've caught in the residence, where my field of vision at times, depending on the severity of this level of technology being used, I can see the gas in my eye move. It's like looking, if you've ever looked at a low-powered, it's the highest power on the low power electric microscope. And it's the oil immersion power. And if you put oil on it and then some kind of resident frequency is turned on, the oil will dance on the stage. That's what happens in my eye, since the eye is made up of oil and gas, and it moves based on the pressure systems in the environment. Easiest way to explain it for anatomical tie-in. But I've seen this as that's an intrinsic value I've picked up on, as an extrinsic value in the field. I had a cup and I had milk, and it was just on the counter, and the vibrations in this field of where I am living produced this result. I heated the milk, and as it cooled, it created a layer. The fat went to the top and made a congealment, and then it was more liquid. So it was more viscous on top, and on the bottom it was more liquid. And in that moment where it was, the top layer was more dense than the lower layer, the vibrations were picked up, and you could see the vibrational pattern through the milk. And it definitely had some of it, like it moved. It just was this moving pattern, for which I videotaped it. Sometimes it's so vibrationally powerful, it's rattled the cabinets, which I've also caught on video camera. But it's also been at the top of the milk in just simple ways. Sometimes I'm out on the streets, and even in a puddle, like you'll see seismic vibrations of the ground, and sometimes it'll be still. I have no idea where it comes from, but this just reminds me that there's stuff coming from space, signal-wise. That's always a possibility. Doesn't mean it's always where it actually effectuates from, but it is always in the back of my mind as a possibility that I don't know if it's local, regional, global issue. I don't know if it's out in space where there's some Star Wars between satellites, satellite companies, some mergers, acquisitions, some governmental, some sociopathic individuals. With a temper and a keyboard, I never know. That's part of the cyber attacks. That's so vicious, and so it's a portion of it. I mean, they've gotten to a really disgusting level that if anybody actually cares within the system, I'll document on a private channel, but the severity and the things I've had to walk through waiting for it to just end, on top of some of this gas that's going on in chemical warfare that nobody seems to talk about, and there's no reps out there collecting data.
Scientists say this photo shows a powerful reaction to violent interactions between two stars in a double star system. It's located only 5,000 light years away from Earth. These violent interactions create rings of dust plumes that can stretch thousands of times the distance between Earth and the Sun. This happens every 8 years when the stars come close together due to their orbit.
Wow. Well, one beautiful picture.
I'm going to go to that mention of this senator race going on in Georgia, where the one candidate is wearing the hanging winged angel that's been represented in my history in one of the Orthodox religions. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that they don't believe in Jesus Christ. But again, they are very significant because they are a piece of Orthodox history for which I don't have access to, whether they speak a different language. I asked the other day, I said I wanted to go to a Greek, the one, St. Nick's is the local Greek church. I don't know if I'll be welcome there personally. I don't know their community. But I wanted to go, and I asked one of the local women who happens to be Greek if it's in English or if it's in another language. She said it's half and half. So then I'm like, I don't know their ceremony, and she doesn't participate in St. Nick's. So then I'm like, no, I'm not going outside of my own namesake on that one. That is like totally foreign to me without an invitation. So that's something that's going on in the local whatever. Now, it's interesting because I feel like at age 44, someone feels like I'm in the way. But that can't possibly be because I am Glenway. That is on my abstract.
As Warnock was questioned about childcare payments to his ex-wife.
Listen, I went through a divorce, like a lot of people. My children know that I am with them and for them, and that I support them in every single way that a father does.
While Walker was pressed about it.
I don't know how to read this situation, but what I will say is this right here is an Orthodox symbol that I've picked up on in the field. I don't know, again, what God, what country, what family, but I see my symbols. I see symbology everywhere I go, trying to pick up on colors and who is gluing their hand to what wall. I'm not, again, I have a lot of pieces going on, and I have some real serious chemical and cyber attacks going on in the field. And there's no real chain of command and protocol or rules of engagement that have been afforded my person. So if there was some misstep along the way, perhaps they wanted to give me a live representative based on the fact that I'm Glenway. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. And the 51515, which is a 1013 in the class of 0238 as astronaut sensitive and like of highest urgency and efficacy. But it comes off the heels, and the cost of that was I was already carved into while I slept. And it already forced me to hold somebody else's kid that I didn't want to ever wake up next to. So here we are.